Hey everyone, are you ready to dive into the world of web development? We're taking a deep dive into a 2024 roadmap I found. Thought it might be fun to break it down together.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
Actually takes you through 10 steps starting from like absolute zero all the way to working with some of the latest tech.
And I really like how it doesn't just, throw code at you right away.
Yeah.
Like it starts by making sure you get the fundamental why behind how these websites actually work.
It's like so important, that foundational knowledge. That's what really separates someone who's just, following instructions from someone who can really problem solve when they're building something.
Exactly. It's like before you build a house, you got to know what makes it stand up, right?
Yeah.
You need that solid foundation.
Exactly. And this roadmap, it really emphasizes that. It uses the example of like knowing how servers and browsers actually talk to each other
Oh yeah, I remember that.
helps you troubleshoot errors way more effectively.
Makes sense. I mean, if you get how the pieces fit together, it's got to be easier to spot where something's gone wrong, right?
Precisely. Like knowing, say, the electrical wiring in your house. If something shorts out, you've got a better shot at fixing it yourself if you get how it all works.
Now, our roadmap, it's not all theory and no action, though. It actually dives into the essential tools every web developer needs in their toolkit these days.
This is huge, having the right tools for the job. The roadmap I was looking at really seems to like VS Code for a code editor.
Yeah, it's free, right?
Yeah, free, crazy fast, and like super customizable.
Yeah, it's like the Swiss Army knife of code editors, according to this roadmap.
And it is. But just like you wouldn't use a Swiss Army knife to chop down a tree, right? I mean, there are other specialized tools out there for specific coding tasks.
Makes sense.
The key is just, being aware of what's out there so you can grab the right tool for the task at hand.
Right on. Okay, so once you've got your toolkit kind of sorted out, it's time to tackle the front end. The part of the website we actually see and interact with every day.
The fun part.
Yeah, and this roadmap, it breaks it down into what it calls the big three:
Oh, yeah, the classics.
HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Those are the foundational languages that every website is built with.
The roadmap actually compares it to learning how websites speak, which I thought was kind of a cool way to put it.
It is. Like HTML, that's like the structure of a web page. Think of it as the skeleton.
Okay.
Then you've got CSS, and that's all about styling that structure, adding colors, fonts, layout, basically,
Yeah.
giving that skeleton some personality.
So HTML sets the bones, CSS dresses it up, and then JavaScript, that's where things get interactive, right?
Exactly. JavaScript brings it all to life. You know those cool image carousels you see on websites, or those smooth scroll-to-top buttons?
Oh, yeah.
That's all JavaScript doing its thing.
And they actually use that scroll to top button as an example on the roadmap, showing how these three technologies work together.
Because they all have to play nicely together.
So like you've got the HTML defining the actual structure of the button, and then you've got CSS styling how it looks, and then JavaScript swoops in and makes it functional, responding to your click and, smoothly taking you back to the top of the page.
Yeah, and it highlights how learning these technologies, they kind of build on each other, right?
Mm.
And in the end, that creates the seamless and engaging experience users are looking for.
So we've got the building blocks. What about those bigger picture tools?
Hmm.
Our roadmap brings up JavaScript frameworks here. How do those fit in?
Well, imagine you're building a house, right?
Right.
And instead of starting from scratch with every single brick and beam, you could use, say, a pre-designed framework.
Oh, okay.
Provides the basic structure, walls, roof, foundation, that sort of thing. Well, frameworks like React, Vue, or Svelte, they do the same for your code.
Interesting. So it's less about writing every single line of code from scratch and more about having like a head start.
Exactly. It can save a ton of time and effort.
Now that you mention it, they do use the example of building a photo gallery in the roadmap and how using a framework can seriously speed things up.
Right, like doing that from scratch would be a lot of work, but a framework like React that gives you all these ready-made components to display those images, handle user interaction, maybe even throw in some cool animations.
While still giving you the control to customize, right?
Exactly. You're not just stuck with a cookie cutter solution. You still have the power to make it your own. It's like, choosing a house plan, you can still customize the finishes, the layout.
Instead of having to invent plumbing.
Exactly. And speaking of popular choices, React still top dog out there, but Vue and Svelte are gaining some serious ground.
They each have their own quirks and advantages, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And our roadmap does a really nice job of laying out like the strengths and weaknesses of each one.
It's almost like choosing the right car for your needs,
Yeah.
right? A sports car is going to be amazing for speed, but an SUV is probably better if you're going off-roading.
And just like with cars, choosing a framework, it all depends on the project, you know? What are you trying to build? What are your priorities?
So many options.
Yeah.
But hey, that's the exciting part of web development, wouldn't you say? Back again, diving deeper into the world of web dev with this 2024 roadmap. We've tackled the basics, the front-end stuff. What about those next-level skills? What's the roadmap say about that?
It's like that moment when you've been playing with Legos, right? And you're like, okay, I'm ready for the Technic sets now.
I like that analogy. So we're stepping it up a notch. More advanced tools, techniques, that sort of thing.
Exactly. This roadmap, it really emphasizes how these intermediate skills, they're all about efficiency and maintainability, especially as those projects, they start to get more and more complex. Like, you don't want to build a skyscraper using the same methods you'd use for a doghouse, right?
Makes sense. You need those stronger, more sophisticated approaches as you scale things up.
Exactly. And speaking of sophisticated, this roadmap, it dives into SAS, which stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets.
Okay, that name alone already sounds next level.
Right. It's basically a CSS preprocessor. Think of it like this. You're making a cake, and instead of measuring out each ingredient every single time, you've got these pre-mixed blends ready to go.
Oh, I get it. So it's about saving time, streamlining the process,
Hmm.
but with code instead of cake.
Exactly. So let's say you want to use a specific color theme across your entire website. Instead of, manually changing every single instance of that color in your CSS file, SAS lets you define variables.
Variables, that's where you give a value a name, right? Like
Yeah.
in math class.
Exactly. So you could have a variable called, say, primary color and set it to like #Ruto000 for red. Then you just use that variable throughout your style sheet whenever you want to use that specific red.
So if you decide to change your color scheme later on, you only have to update it in one place, and it ripples throughout the entire website.
Precisely. And that's just one example. The roadmap goes into a lot more detail about how SAS can help you write cleaner, more organized, and more importantly, maintainable CSS code.
Maintainability, that's key, especially as websites get more and more complex, right?
Absolutely. It's like the difference between sketching on a napkin versus creating a detailed architectural blueprint. As your project scales, you need more robust tools and techniques to keep everything organized and manageable.
And speaking of crucial aspects for modern web development, this roadmap, it really seems to emphasize responsive design, which makes sense. Everyone's on their phones these days.
It's non-negotiable in 2024. Users, they expect a seamless experience on every device. Phones, tablets, laptops, those big desktop screens, everything.
So instead of having to build like separate websites for every single screen size, responsive design is about making one website that can adapt, right?
Precisely. And this roadmap, it gets into things like CSS Grid and Flexbox, which are tools that give developers really fine-grained control over how content is displayed on different screen sizes. It's like, imagine a chameleon, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It changes its skin color to blend in with its environment, right? That's kind of what responsive design does for websites.
It adapts to its surroundings.
Exactly. And it ensures that no matter what device someone's using, they're going to have a good experience.
All right, so we've covered SAS, responsive design. Is that all for the intermediate stuff, or is there more? I'm starting to feel like we're just scratching the surface here, which is, kind of exciting, but also a little daunting.
Oh, we've got more. This roadmap, it's really comprehensive. But don't worry, it's like peeking behind the curtain. You get to see how things are made.
I do love a good behind-the-scenes look.
Right. So the next things on the list, they sound technical, but they're actually huge time savers. Package managers and build tools.
Okay, I'm always down for saving time, especially when it comes to coding. Sometimes it feels like it takes forever.
Oh, tell me about it. Okay, imagine you're baking a cake again, right?
Back to the cakes. I love it.
You could make everything from scratch, like mill your own flour,
Way too much work.
Or you could just use pre-made ingredients to speed things up. That's what package managers are like. They're like grocery stores for code.
Okay, that's an analogy I can get behind.
So they provide access to all these pre-built code packages, or what we call modules, that you can just grab and plug into your projects.
So instead of reinventing the wheel every time, you can just grab a pre-built module for, say, like a contact form or a photo carousel. That's brilliant.
Exactly. It saves so much time, and it lets you tap into the expertise of like this huge community of developers.
That's incredible. So package managers, those are all about reusing code, working smarter, not harder. What about these build tools that the roadmap mentions?
Right. So you know how sometimes you have to really cram things into a suitcase to make them fit?
Who doesn't?
Build tools, they're kind of like professional suitcase packers for your code.
Yeah.
They do things like minification, which is basically, removing all the unnecessary characters and spaces to make your code as small as possible.
So it's still doing the same thing, just in a more streamlined package.
Exactly. Makes it load faster, run more efficiently. They can also combine multiple files into one, optimize images, all sorts of behind-the-scenes magic to make your website as fast and smooth as possible.
It's like those people who can pack a week's worth of clothes into a carry-on. I'm always amazed by their skills.
Right. Build tools, they're the masters of code optimization. They help ensure your website is running at peak performance.
We've gone from those front-end fundamentals all the way to these more advanced tools like Sass and these build tools. And honestly, it feels like we've only scratched the surface. But up next, our roadmap takes us behind the scenes into the world of back-end development, the part the users don't see, but that makes everything tick. And we'll dive into that right after a quick break. And we're back. Still going strong with this deep dive into this web dev roadmap for 2024. We spent a good amount of time exploring the front end, the stuff we see and click on, but now it's time to venture into the world behind the curtain back-end development. It's a bit mysterious to me, I'll admit.
Well, if you think about it, the front end is like the stage production, all the dazzling lights in action, but the back end is all the, the rigging, the lights, the crew, making it all happen behind the scenes.
So it's like the behind-the-scenes engine that keeps everything running smoothly, kind of. The roadmap mentions back-end involves things like server-side logic and databases. And honestly, that's where I start to feel like, ooh, this is getting a bit technical.
It can seem that way, but at its core, it's all about how websites store and manage information. Imagine, for example, you're running a library. You need a system to keep track of all the books, right? Who's got what? When it's due, that's what the back end's doing for websites and apps.
So if the front end is what the user sees and interacts with, the back end is like the organizational brains of the operation, making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes.
Exactly. And just like you have different types of engines for different vehicles, you wouldn't put a scooter engine in a race car, right? You've got different tools and technologies for different back-end needs.
And the roadmap I'm looking at, it does mention a few. Back-end languages like Node.js, Python, and PHP. Are any of those the best one to learn?
That's the thing. There isn't a best, really. It's more like choosing the right tool for the job. It depends on what you're building, your preferences as a developer. The roadmap actually compares it to choosing building materials, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Like you could build a house out of wood or brick or concrete. Each one's got its own pros and cons, its best uses. Same with back-end languages.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job, making informed decisions based on what you're trying to accomplish.
Precisely. And just like a house needs a solid foundation, websites and applications need a way to store and manage all that data. That's where databases come in.
Ah, yes, databases. The roadmap talks about those too, specifically two main types, SQL and NoSQL. Is it getting nerdy to admit I have no idea what the difference is?
Not at all. Think of SQL databases like those super organized spreadsheets, all those neat rows and columns. They're great for storing information that has a really clear structure. Customer info, financial records, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. So then what's NoSQL all about?
Think of those more like flexible filing cabinets, You can kind of toss things in there and organize them in a way that makes sense for that type of data. Better for larger amounts of data, things that aren't so neatly categorized, maybe social media posts, sensor readings, that kind of thing.
So SQL for when you need strict organization. NoSQL for more flexibility and scale. It's like choosing between a filing cabinet and a set of shelves. Both have their uses. Depends what you're storing.
Exactly. And the important thing, like we've been saying, is understanding those strengths and limitations so you can make the best choice for what you're building.
Now, this roadmap doesn't stop at just the traditional aspects of web development. It also peeks into the future a bit. One thing it mentioned that always throws me off is this idea of serverless architecture. How can you have a website without servers? It just sounds, I don't know, impossible.
It's a little bit of a buzzword, honestly. It's not that there are literally no servers, but it's more like you as the developer, you're not the one managing them directly. It's more like instead of owning a car, you're just using a ride-sharing service whenever you need to go somewhere.
So you still get to your destination.
Yeah.
You're just letting someone else handle the car maintenance and all that.
Exactly. You're essentially renting computing power on demand rather than owning and maintaining your own servers. This roadmap points to things like AWS Lambda and Google Cloud Functions as good examples of that.
So instead of having to set up and manage your own servers, you're basically like renting out server space from these big companies whenever you need it.
Precisely. It can really simplify things, especially for smaller projects or projects that don't have super consistent traffic.
Makes sense. And of course, it wouldn't be a 2024 roadmap without mentioning AI, right?
Right.
Seems like it's infiltrating every field these days. What's the web dev angle, according to this roadmap?
AI is changing the game, no doubt. Imagine like websites that can personalize content based on what it knows about you, your preferences, or those chatbots that are popping up everywhere these days, giving instant customer support.
Right. I've definitely seen those more and more often. It's kind of cool, but also a little creepy sometimes.
It's definitely a brave new world. And it can even go further. Like some AI tools can help with generating actual code, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Wow. That's wild. From the very building blocks of how websites work all the way to AI-powered features, this roadmap has been an incredible journey.
It really has. And it just goes to show, this field, it's constantly evolving, always something new to learn and explore.
For sure. So whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro, I think the main takeaway is this. Never stop learning. Stay curious. Embrace the ever-changing landscape that what makes web development so exciting.
Couldn't agree more. It's a field that rewards curiosity and a passion for pushing those creative boundaries.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of web development. Hopefully everyone listening feels as inspired as I do to dive in and start building something amazing. Thanks for joining us on this adventure, and until next time, happy coding.